When you begin to recognize narcissistic patterns, something shifts inside you. It's like the moment fog begins to lift, and you start to see the outline of a landscape that was always there but hidden. The narcissist senses this shift too. They notice when your eyes no longer hold the same unquestioning belief in their words. They feel the change when you stop reacting with the same intensity to their manipulation, their criticism, or their grandiose displays. Narcissists are acutely sensitive to shifts in power dynamics, and when they realize you are starting to understand who they are, they don't take it lightly. The realization doesn't come all at once. For you, it may start with little things, questioning a backhanded compliment, feeling uneasy after a conversation that was supposed to be supportive, but left you drained, or catching the inconsistencies in their stories. And when you pull back and observe instead of absorbing, you're no longer playing the role they've cast you in. To a narcissist, that change is like a siren going off. It threatens the foundation of control they rely on. They know you know when your compliance shifts into silence, when your enthusiasm becomes measured, and when your deference turns into distance. The strategies they use at this point can vary. Some narcissists will double down, pushing harder, escalating their behaviors, because they feel the walls closing in. They may become more cruel, more dismissive, more cutting. Others may turn on the charm, almost overnight, as though they have transformed into the most attentive, loving, supportive version of themselves. That sudden surge of kindness isn't real. It's a tactic to pull you back into place. They know your doubts could grow into action, and action could mean you walk away or hold them accountable, which is a narcissist's greatest fear. What makes this stage so painful is that you start to see the patterns clearly, but you're still emotionally entangled. There's confusion, guilt, and sometimes even fear. You may question yourself, asking if you're imagining things or being too harsh. But the very fact that you're asking those questions is a sign of awakening. Narcissists rely on people not seeing clearly. They thrive in that fog. So when they sense the fog is lifting, they do whatever they can to pull it back down over you. That's why it's so critical to trust what you are noticing. They may accuse you of being paranoid, overly sensitive, or even narcissistic yourself. This is projection, a way of deflecting the reality that you've begun to grasp. They'll weaponize your empathy, your desire to be fair, and your fear of conflict. They know that if they can get you tangled in defending yourself or proving your intentions, they can shift the focus away from their behavior. It's not just about control. It's about survival for them, because your awareness dismantles the illusion they've worked so hard to maintain. But here's what's powerful. Once you know, you cannot unknow. You might try to minimize it. You might suppress it. but the truth of what you've seen lives inside you. The narcissist knows this too. Even if you stay, even if you comply, there is a fracture in their control. They know your trust isn't intact, and that reality unnerves them. Sometimes this is when relationships with narcissists become the most volatile, because their insecurity turns into desperation. They may lash out, smear you, or punish you in subtle or overt ways. Other times, they may retreat, withholding affection, validation, or attention as a way to reassert power. It's important to remember that their recognition of your awareness is not a triumph for them. It's a threat, and it's not a game you can win by proving your worth, arguing harder, or giving more. They already see that you see, and that alone changes the dynamic forever. What you do with that knowledge is what determines your next chapter. Awareness can feel heavy because it comes with grief. You grieve the illusion of who you thought they were, the relationship you believed you had, and the hope that if you just did things differently, everything would be okay. But awareness is also freedom. Once you recognize the truth, you can make choices rooted in reality rather than fantasy. You can set boundaries, you can protect your peace, and you can stop internalizing their behavior as a reflection of your worth. When narcissists know that they may escalate, they may charm, they may rage, or they may withdraw. But in all of it, they're showing you the very truth you've uncovered. Their world is built on manipulation, control, and performance. Your clarity threatens that, and their reactions confirm it. The question then becomes not how they will respond, but how you will protect the clarity you've fought so hard to find. Narcissists have an uncanny ability to sense shifts in the people around them, almost like they are finely tuned radar systems picking up even the smallest changes in behavior, tone, or energy. When you begin to see through them, even if you haven't said a word out loud, they can often tell. It's not about what you directly confront them with. It's about what you stop giving them. They thrive on your unquestioning validation, your emotional reactions, your willingness to buy into their stories, and your eagerness to make them feel important. The moment any of that starts to fade, they sense it like a crack in their mirror. Their entire identity rests on the reflections they see in others, and when your reflection shifts from admiration to doubt, from compliance to quiet resistance, they feel threatened. This is why even subtle changes, like responding more calmly instead of reacting emotionally, questioning them instead of accepting everything at face value, or showing less interest in their drama, send signals they cannot ignore. For example, if you used to laugh at all their jokes, even the ones that weren't funny, and now you don't, they notice. If you once hung on their every word, but now you seem distracted or distant, they feel it. Narcissists are hypervigilant, constantly scanning their environment to ensure their ego supply remains intact. They are not just aware of how others treat them. They are deeply invested in controlling that treatment. So when you begin to pull away emotionally, when your eyes no longer reflect the admiration they crave, when you don't play along with their manipulations, they know something has shifted. And because control is everything to them, this awareness creates panic, though they'll never admit it. Instead, they'll frame it as suspicion, as criticism, or as you being the problem. You may think you're hiding your awareness, keeping it quiet, processing it internally while still playing along externally. But narcissists are skilled at reading micro expressions, tone changes, and the smallest signs of distance. If you stop defending them in conversations, if you stop engaging with their baiting, or if you start standing your ground more often, these small but meaningful changes break the rhythm they're used to. They have crafted a dynamic where you are supposed to serve their needs. So the moment you stop dancing to their tune, they feel it. It's not unlike how someone notices when the lights in a room dim. There's an immediate recognition that something is different. And for a narcissist, different almost always means dangerous. It's not just behavior, though. They can sense it in your energy. When you are still under their spell, you may give off a sense of eager engagement, of trying to please, of wanting harmony at any cost. But once you start to awaken to their manipulation, your energy shifts into guardedness, skepticism, or even quiet detachment. Even if you're smiling and saying all the right things, they sense that your heart isn't in it anymore. They read that as betrayal, as defiance, as rebellion. And to a narcissist, someone who knows the truth about them is not just a threat. They are a liability, because their entire world is constructed around maintaining the illusion of who they want others to believe they are. This is why they so often react strongly when they know you know. The fear isn't just about losing your admiration. It's about losing control of the story. They live in a carefully crafted performance, and once someone sees the backstage mess, it destabilizes the whole act. They may lash out, they may accuse you, or they may suddenly become excessively attentive as a way of testing whether you're really slipping out of their grip. But the key point is this: they always know. You cannot mask your awareness from them because their survival depends on monitoring the emotional climate around them. It's important to understand this so you don't second guess yourself. Many people think, maybe I'm being too obvious, or maybe I should keep pretending I don't see it. But no matter how much you pretend, the narcissist's internal alarm has already gone off. They know when admiration turns into doubt. They know when obedience turns into quiet resistance. They know when belief turns into suspicion. And once they know, the relationship dynamic will never be the same again. That's the silent but powerful shift. When you know, they know you know. And that knowledge becomes the new, unspoken undercurrent in every interaction that follows. When a narcissist realizes that you have begun to see through them, their response is rarely neutral. They don't shrug and accept that you now understand their patterns. Instead, they react in ways designed to either pull you back under their control or punish you for stepping out of line. Their sense of self is so fragile that any hint of exposure feels like a direct threat to their survival. That's why their responses tend to fall into two broad categories: escalation or manipulation cloaked in charm. They will either push harder, becoming crueler and more dismissive, or they will suddenly become attentive, kind, and even loving in ways that feel almost too good to be true. Both tactics are aimed at the same goal: restoring the balance of power and making sure you stay in the role they expect from you. Escalation is often the first weapon they reach for. You might notice that they become more cutting with their words, mocking you more openly, or ridiculing you in front of others. They may increase their criticism, finding fault in everything you do, because criticism is one of their sharpest tools to make you question yourself. If they sense you're slipping away emotionally, they may deliberately push your buttons to provoke a reaction. They want to see that you still care enough to argue, defend yourself, or cry. Those reactions reassure them that they still hold emotional power over you. Sometimes escalation shows up as anger, sudden outbursts, or even cold, punishing silence. The goal is the same: to destabilize you, to make you doubt your own awareness, and to remind you that stepping out of line comes with consequences. On the other hand, some narcissists shift into charm mode, which can be just as confusing, if not more so. Suddenly, they become attentive, generous, and affectionate, offering you the version of themselves you may have always wished for. They might buy you gifts, give you compliments, or act more caring than they have in years. This is not a real transformation. It is a performance designed to test whether you can still be pulled back in. It's almost like they sense they're about to lose their grip, so they double down on their ability to dazzle and disarm you. And because many people caught in narcissistic dynamics long for that validation and warmth, this charm offensive can feel intoxicating. It makes you question whether you misjudged them, whether things can still go back to how they were in the very beginning. But that's exactly the trap. They're using kindness as a form of manipulation to reestablish control. Sometimes they will cycle between these two strategies. One moment raging, the next moment tender. This back and forth creates confusion and emotional whiplash, which keeps you destabilized. When you don't know whether you'll be punished or rewarded, you spend your energy trying to predict and adjust your behavior to avoid conflict or to keep the good version of them around. This unpredictability works in their favor because it keeps you focused on them rather than trusting your own instincts. The push pull dynamic is deliberate. It's meant to exhaust you and weaken your resolve so you slip back into compliance. Another tactic they might use is turning the tables and accusing you. If they sense you know too much, they may label you as paranoid, controlling, or even narcissistic yourself. This projection is an intentional strategy to make you doubt your own clarity. If you're constantly on the defensive, trying to prove your intentions or innocence, you don't have the mental space to stand firm in your awareness. This is one of the most disorienting responses because it weaponizes your empathy. You might start asking yourself, am I really the problem? Am I being unfair? And once you're back in that loop of self-doubt, they regain their leverage. These responses can be exhausting and confusing, but it's essential to recognize them for what they are: strategies to regain control. Whether they come in the form of cruelty, kindness, or accusations, the underlying motivation is the same. They cannot tolerate the idea of losing the upper hand because their sense of self depends on maintaining dominance in the relationship. Every reaction is calculated to remind you of your place, to keep you doubting your perceptions, and to ensure that the focus stays on them. The difficult part for those caught in these dynamics is that these responses often feel personal. When they lash out, it feels like rejection. When they turn on the charm, it feels like hope. But the truth is, neither response is about you. It's about them protecting their fragile ego. Escalation and charm are not signs of their strength. They are signs of their fear. They know that once you see the truth, their ability to control you is compromised. Once you recognize the patterns of a narcissist, something irreversible happens. That awareness may come slowly through small realizations, or it may hit you suddenly in a moment of clarity, but once it arrives, it cannot be erased. You may try to suppress it, convince yourself you're overreacting, or minimize what you've seen, but deep down, you cannot unknow the truth. It settles in your mind like a seed that grows quietly, no matter how much you try to ignore it. And this is precisely what changes the dynamic between you and the narcissist forever. They know when you know, and you know that they know, and there is no way back to the blind trust that once existed. That fracture, once formed, never fully closes again. This is why people often describe living with a narcissist as a kind of performance. Before awareness, you might have played your role without question, believing the narrative they created, even if parts of it didn't sit right. You justified their behavior, explained away their cruelty, and convinced yourself that things weren't as bad as they felt. But the moment your eyes open, you're no longer a willing actor in their script. You may still play along at times, but you're doing so with an entirely different perspective. You're aware that the compliments are calculated, that the criticisms are strategic, and that the kindness comes with strings attached. This knowledge alters how you respond, even in small ways, and those changes never go unnoticed. The narcissist feels that shift in control like a vibration in the air. They can sense when their grip on you isn't as tight as it used to be. Even if you don't challenge them openly, even if you continue to meet their demands, they know the difference between someone who is genuinely enthralled and someone who is performing out of necessity. That difference unsettles them because their sense of self depends on maintaining illusions. They require their reality to be mirrored back to them without distortion. And when you can no longer give them that reflection, they feel exposed. You may find yourself caught in a painful in-between place. On one hand, you see the truth more clearly than ever before. On the other hand, you may not feel ready to act on it. You might stay silent for the sake of peace, avoid confrontation to protect yourself, or even pretend for a while longer because leaving or setting firm boundaries feels overwhelming. But even if you stay physically or emotionally connected, your awareness has already changed the relationship. The narcissist knows the bond of unquestioning trust has been broken, and they cannot ignore it. What makes this stage so significant is that it represents a permanent shift in power, even if the narcissist tries to reclaim it. They may escalate, manipulate, or charm, but you are no longer the same. You may still be vulnerable to their tactics, but you're also observing them with new eyes. Every cruel comment, every sudden burst of affection, every attempt to twist the truth, these things now stand out to you in a way they never did before. And once you've seen the pattern, it becomes impossible to unsee it. This awareness also starts to protect you, even if you don't feel strong enough to take big steps. When you know what's happening, you stop blaming yourself for every conflict or feeling like you're at fault for their moods. You begin to notice that their kindness often comes after a moment of cruelty, or that their anger flares up when you stop giving them what they want. You start to piece together the cycle, and with that understanding, you gain small but meaningful spaces of freedom. Maybe you stop reacting to their bait. Maybe you don't rush to defend yourself against every accusation. Maybe you take more time to yourself without explaining. These shifts, though subtle, are powerful because they come from the recognition that you are not the problem. The narcissist, of course, notices these changes too. They may accuse you of being distant, cold, or ungrateful. They may try to pull you back into the old dynamic by questioning your loyalty or making you feel guilty. But even their reactions confirm the truth you've uncovered, that they depend on your compliance for their sense of control. And once you've seen that dependency for what it is, you can't go back to believing they hold all the power. Awareness is not just a mental shift, it's an emotional awakening. It's the point where you stop internalizing their behavior as proof of your flaws and begin to see it as a reflection of who they are. That change may not free you overnight, but it starts to build resilience. And once you reach that point, no amount of gaslighting, charm, or cruelty can ever fully return you to the person you were before you knew. Clarity often arrives with a heaviness that surprises people. You might expect that recognizing the truth about a narcissist would feel like pure relief, but in reality, it comes with grief. You grieve the illusion of who you thought they were. The hope that if you just loved them enough or worked harder, things would get better, and the fantasy that the relationship could one day become what you always wanted it to be. That grief can be profound because it means letting go not only of the person, but of the dream you built around them. Yet, intertwined with that grief is freedom. Freedom doesn't always feel light at first. It can feel painful, uncertain, and overwhelming, but it's the beginning of reclaiming your life from the grip of manipulation. When you reach clarity, you begin to see the patterns for what they are. You no longer confuse intermittent kindness with love, or cruelty disguised as help with concern. Instead, you recognize the cycle, and once you see it, you can't go back to pretending it isn't there. This recognition is painful because it forces you to admit that the person you trusted may never be capable of giving you the respect, empathy, or stability you deserve. But it also liberates you from the endless loop of trying to fix what was never yours to fix. That is the paradox of clarity. It breaks your heart while simultaneously giving you back your power. At first, freedom may not look like walking away. It might simply look like setting small boundaries, saying no to demands that once drained you, or refusing to take the bait in arguments. Each time you choose to protect your peace rather than feed their chaos, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Narcissists thrive on pulling others into their storm, but clarity allows you to step out of it, even if you're still physically present in the relationship. Over time, these small acts of resistance add up. They remind you that your worth is not defined by their approval, and that your voice, your needs, and your boundaries matter. Freedom also shows up in how you think about yourself. Before clarity, you may have spent endless hours blaming yourself, wondering what you did wrong, or trying to anticipate how to keep them happy. Their moods dictated your self-esteem, and their approval felt like the only measure of your value. But once clarity sets in, that cycle begins to shift. You start to see that their behavior is not about your inadequacy, but about their inability to relate with genuine empathy. This doesn't erase the hurt, but it gives you a foundation to stop carrying responsibility for their dysfunction. The freedom lies in recognizing that you are not broken. You were simply tangled in a web designed to make you doubt yourself. Of course, clarity can be lonely. It often isolates you from the illusion you once shared with them, and sometimes from others who still believe that illusion. You may find yourself questioning who will understand or support you if you decide to create distance. That loneliness is real, but it is also temporary. The more you live in truth, the more space you create for genuine connections, ones built on respect rather than control. Freedom doesn't just remove what is harmful. It opens the door to relationships that are healthier and more fulfilling, even if those relationships take time to arrive. One of the most important parts of this stage is learning to trust yourself again. Narcissists are skilled at eroding self-trust through gaslighting, criticism, and shifting blame. They want you to second guess your every thought and feeling so you remain dependent on their version of reality. Clarity interrupts that cycle. Every time you affirm your perception, every time you hold firm to your boundary, you strengthen your trust in yourself. That is where true freedom begins, not in escaping the narcissist immediately, but in rebuilding your belief that your reality is valid and your needs are legitimate. There will be moments when you miss the illusion, when the grief feels heavier than the freedom. That is normal. The illusion was comforting in its own way because it allowed you to believe in possibilities that felt safe and hopeful. But illusions can never provide the stability, love, or peace that truth can. Even when truth feels raw, it is the only ground solid enough to build a life on. Freedom rooted in clarity is not about denying the pain. It is about walking forward with your eyes open, knowing that what you leave behind cannot compare to what you are reclaiming. Clarity and grief will always walk together, but they lead you to a place where you no longer live under the shadow of someone else's control. That is the true gift of awareness. Even if the process is slow, even if the grief lingers, every step you take rooted in clarity is a step toward freedom. And that freedom becomes the foundation of a life that is finally yours again. Awareness of a narcissist's patterns is both a rupture and a rebirth. It shatters the illusion that kept you tethered, but it also plants the seed of freedom that can grow into strength and self-trust. When they know that you know, their behavior may intensify, their charm may resurface, or their accusations may escalate. But none of that can erase the fact that you now see clearly. That clarity may bring grief, but it also strips away confusion, reminding you that their actions are not a reflection of your worth. What you choose to do with this awareness will shape your next chapter. But the most important truth is this: once the fog has lifted, it cannot return. That vision, though painful, is your power, and it will guide you toward boundaries, healing, and ultimately freedom.